Under the polished chandeliers of Crestfield Academy, where last names hung heavier than any diploma and legacies were passed down like antique silverware, no one expected the boy in the gray hoodie to change everything. They laughed when he walked through the front gate for the first time. They laughed louder when they learned he wasn't a new janitor or a delivery kid, but a scholarship student. They didn't know his name, didn't care where he came from. They just knew he didn't belong. That morning started like any other. The hallways buzzed with entitled chatter, students wrapped in their own curated worlds. Talk of yacht parties, legacy admissions, ski trips to Aspen. No one paid attention to Malik Johnson, and Malik liked it that way. He moved through Crestfield with purpose and invisibility. The quieter he was, the less they noticed. The less they noticed, the fewer problems he had to dodge. But on this day, the air held something different. He could feel it. Not in the whispers or the glances, but in the stillness, like the way a forest silences before the storm hits. He had exactly 5 minutes to get to AP Physics. His mind was already in the lab, already calibrating numbers and imagining gravitational pulls, until he turned the corner and ran right into the wall that was Connor Blake. Literally. Connor, 6'1", blue-eyed arrogance in human form, stood dead in the middle of the hallway with his arms folded, a smugness plastered across his perfect jaw. Flanked by 2 other boys with expensive haircuts and empty expressions, Connor looked like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Well, well," he drawled, stepping forward. "Lost, are we?" Malik didn't flinch. His eyes scanned for a way around. Connor blocked it. "This hallway's for students, not staff." There it was. A ripple of chuckles floated through the hallway as phones subtly rose, their cameras already rolling. At Crestfield, when Connor spoke, the school listened, or at least they pretended to, for their own safety. Malik adjusted the strap on his backpack. "Move," he said quietly. The laughter halted, not because the volume of Malik's voice demanded it, but because no one told Connor Blake to move. Connor's smirk widened. "What did you say to me?" "I said," Malik repeated a little more firmly, "move. I have class." There was a beat of silence. Then Connor stepped closer, and in front of a hallway full of students, teachers pretending not to see, and a half-dozen cameras catching every angle, he shoved him. It was more than a push. It was a statement, a declaration, a ritual of dominance meant to remind everyone watching who held power here. Only, it didn't land the way he expected. Malik stumbled back half a step, and for a second, the world slowed. You could see it, something changing in his posture, the way his shoulders settled, the way his breath steadied. Something ancient and unshakable emerged. Not rage, not fear, but clarity. He dropped his bag. Connor barely had time to blink. In one seamless motion, Malik stepped into him, gripped his elbow, rotated, and flipped the golden boy of Crestfield Academy flat onto his back. The sound of Connor hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot. The hallway, previously filled with gasps and giggles, fell completely silent. Connor groaned, stunned, arms splayed like he'd forgotten how gravity worked. He looked up at the ceiling, dazed. The king had fallen, and his crown shattered on the linoleum. Malik didn't gloat. He didn't pose. He simply bent down, picked up his backpack, and stepped around Connor's body like it was just another hallway obstacle. "Don't put your hands on people," he said softly. "Even the quiet ones." Then he walked away. The silence broke like glass. Screams, laughter, applause. Phones were high in the air. One kid shouted, "World star." Someone else said, "He's a damn ninja." But Malik didn't look back. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. Because he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The world moved on, but Malik Johnson didn't. 2 days had passed since the hallway flipped upside down, since Connor Blake's back met the cold linoleum in a moment that would become a digital legend. The video spread like wildfire, first through the students of Crestfield Academy, then through the town of Boston, then out into the viral abyss of the internet. TikTok duets, Twitter threads, local news headlines. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Everyone had an opinion. But Malik wasn't reading the comments. He didn't laugh at the memes or smile when people reenacted the flip in the cafeteria. He didn't care for the sudden applause, the random students now eager to sit beside him, high-five him, or shout his name in the halls. Because for Malik, it wasn't a moment to celebrate. It was a moment he'd spent years trying to avoid. He sat alone in the back corner of the library, fingers curled tightly around a mechanical pencil, not writing anything in particular. The notebook in front of him was open to a blank page. He wasn't sure how to start. His mind was full of noise, but none of it wanted to come out in neat little sentences. Not yet. What the world saw was a kid standing up for himself. What Malik felt was something entirely different. He remembered being 9 years old, small and quiet, clinging to his mother's hand as 2 police officers slammed his father against the hood of a car outside a grocery store. The charge? Suspicious loitering. His father hadn't fought. He hadn't spoken. He'd just looked at Malik as if to say, "See, this is why you stay invisible." After that day, Malik's grandfather enrolled him in Aikido classes, not to make him a fighter, but to teach him how not to fight. "You don't use force to prove something," his grandfather said. "You use control to protect everything." That lesson stayed with him. Through schoolyard insults. Through late-night whispers that he didn't belong. Through Crestfield's cold stares and sideways glances. That lesson was the reason he'd never hit back. Not once. Until now. And even then, he hadn't attacked. He'd defended. A single move. Reflex. A reset. But still, it haunted him. What no one knew was that Malik didn't sleep much after that. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the thud of Connor's body on the floor. Not because he regretted it, but because he knew what would come next. Power never lets go quietly. By the 3rd day, the silence turned into a whisper campaign. He noticed the difference. Teachers who once praised his essays now avoided his eyes. Mr. Ellison, who wrote him a glowing letter of recommendation to Princeton, suddenly canceled their meeting. The school counselor called him in, not to check on his mental health, but to ask if he'd be comfortable participating in a mediation circle. Mediation? For what? He hadn't started anything. He'd ended something. Still, the pressure was mounting. Then came the articles, carefully worded opinion pieces in local media, prompted no doubt by Senator Blake's PR team. They didn't name Malik directly, but phrases like aggressive behavior among lower-income scholarship students painted the picture clearly enough. And that's when the real damage began. One by one, emails from college recruiters slowed down. The invitation to the STEM Scholars Weekend at Yale? Postponed. The Zoom call with a Harvard admissions rep? Rescheduled. Indefinitely. All because he dared to defend himself in a school that had never defended him. Malik never fought with fists. He fought in the quiet, in long nights at the public library, in early mornings volunteering at the community center, in test scores that beat out classmates with private tutors. That was his war. And now, somehow, it felt like he was losing it. He closed the notebook. Still blank. Still heavy. At lunch, he sat alone, as always. But now, people looked. Stared. Some smiled. Most didn't. They just watched him like a lit fuse, waiting to see if he'd go off again, as if violence had become his identity. But Malik wasn't angry. He was exhausted. That night, after his homework was done, he sat on the stoop outside his grandmother's apartment in Roxbury, hoodie drawn tight against the wind. He could see the skyline of Boston in the distance, all the bright lights that seemed so close and so far at once. "Writing tonight?" his grandmother asked, easing down beside him with a warm cup of tea. "Trying," he said, "but I can't seem to say anything that doesn't feel wrong." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her cardigan pocket, pulled out a folded, yellowed letter. "Your grandfather wrote this the day after he got suspended for defending a black girl who was being harassed in his college dorm. He didn't swing either. Just stood between her and a bottle someone was about to throw." Malik unfolded the letter gently. The ink had faded, but the words were strong. "They'll call you angry when you're firm. They'll call you dangerous when you're unafraid. But don't let them rename you. You are not their labels. You are your legacy." He felt something shift inside him. Not fire, not peace, But permission. Back in his room, Malik picked up the same pencil. This time, he didn't freeze. He began to write. Not about the flip. Not about Connor. He wrote to himself. To the kid who felt invisible every day and still showed up. To the boy who learned restraint before revenge. To the young man who was starting to understand that justice doesn't come with applause, but with endurance. And this time, the page didn't stay blank. The message came after school, tucked between the usual clutter of class group chats and assignment reminders. Gym, 4:30, no cameras. Let's settle this. No name, no context. But Malik didn't need one. He stared at the text for a full minute, his thumb hovering over the screen like it might burn him. There were no threats in the message, no slurs or curses. Just an invitation. A trap disguised as a test. And Malik, tired of being tested, almost deleted it. But something told him this wasn't just about him anymore. By 4:28, he was standing outside the gymnasium. The sky above Crestfield Academy had dimmed to a soft, bruised blue, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. The students were gone, the teachers already home or buried in grading. The campus was silent, but Malik could feel the weight of eyes watching him from the windows above. Maybe not now, but soon. He opened the gym door slowly. The silence inside felt thick, almost sacred. The polished wood floor reflected the amber light from the high windows, and championship banners hung like ghostly reminders of a school that celebrated dominance. Then he saw them. Connor Blake stood at center court like a king summoned for vengeance. Behind him, Matt, Leo, and Eric, his loyal shadows, stood in formation. 4 of Crestfield's most athletic seniors, all dressed in gym clothes, all staring at Malik like he was already on the ground. Malik walked forward without speaking. No flinch, no hesitation. "So you came," Connor said, voice low and slow. "Didn't think you had it in you." "I'm not here to fight," Malik said, his voice calm, controlled. Connor laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the empty gym. "Then you came to lose." Malik didn't answer. He took off his jacket and set it neatly on the bleachers. Then he looked at each of them, one by one. There was no fear in his eyes, only presence. Matt moved first, a fast, reckless lunge meant to intimidate. Malik sidestepped, using the man's own momentum to send him sprawling into the floor with a twist of the shoulder. Leo charged next, swinging wide. Malik ducked, spun, and let Leo's fist hit air before sweeping his legs from under him. Eric tried to come from behind, hands out, hoping to grab and pin Malik, but Malik anticipated it. He dropped to one knee, driving an elbow back into Eric's ribs. A choked grunt followed, then Eric dropped to all fours, winded and dazed. 3 down. Connor's face twisted with disbelief. "You think this makes you a man?" he growled. Malik said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence could be louder than fury. Connor charged like a bull, wild, desperate, furious. He swung with no discipline, no structure, only the primal need to win. But Malik was water. Every blow missed. Every movement turned against its source. When Connor stumbled, Malik didn't strike. He simply stepped aside and let gravity finish what anger had started. Connor hit the court hard. Again. But this time, he didn't rise. He lay there breathing heavily, his chest heaving like he'd run a marathon of ego and lost every step. Malik stood over him, breathing evenly. "You think you've been fighting me," he said softly. "But really, you've been fighting the idea of someone like me being more than what you decided I should be." Connor's eyes narrowed. "You think this makes you better than me?" Malik's voice dropped. I think this proves I didn't need to be." He walked to the edge of the gym, picked up his jacket, and just as he turned to leave, the gym doors burst open. Coach Jenkins, Principal Redford, Ms. Garcia, 2 other faculty members, and a security guard holding a tablet. They'd been watching, the entire time. "What the hell is going on here?" Redford barked, his voice shaking with restrained fury. Ms. Garcia stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I thought something like this might happen," she said quietly. "So I activated the school's gym camera feed. I've seen everything. Malik didn't lay a single strike unless it was defensive. He didn't initiate. He didn't escalate. Connor sat up, blinking in disbelief. He ambushed us. Enough, Redford cut him off. You'll have your turn. But the truth was clear, caught from multiple angles in high resolution. Malik had not attacked. He had responded. He had deflected. He had endured. In the days that followed, the footage would go public. Not by Malik, but by the administration itself, under pressure to be transparent. The story flipped again. Black student defends himself against targeted attack at elite academy. Emails flooded in from parents, alumni, journalists. Crestfield's reputation trembled. Connor was suspended indefinitely. Matt, Leo, and Eric were placed on behavioral contracts with mandatory counseling. And Malik, he was called a hero again. But this time, it didn't feel any better. Because Malik hadn't wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to be safe, wanted to learn, to grow, to dream in peace. Instead, he had to fight, again, not to win, but to survive with his dignity intact. That night, back in his room, Malik wrote until his hand cramped. Not in his notebook this time, but in a new document he titled The Price of Peace. He didn't write about violence, he wrote about restraint. About the war inside your chest when someone pushes you to become the version of yourself they expect. Angry, wild, uncontrolled. And the strength it takes to choose something higher. That night, he didn't just win a battle. He reclaimed his narrative. And in doing so, began to reshape the rules of the school that thought it already knew his story. It had been 5 days since the gym incident. And though Malik Johnson had returned home without a bruise, something in him felt fractured. He didn't talk much. Not to classmates who offered awkward compliments in the hallways, not to teachers who now greeted him with overcompensating smiles, and not even to Ms. Garcia, whose quiet intervention had spared him from being labeled a criminal. There was a weight to being seen so publicly, first as a villain, then as a hero, that Malik hadn't asked for. He had defended himself, nothing more. But somehow, that had become a statement, a spectacle. That evening, he sat on the back porch of the small brick apartment he shared with his grandmother, Alma. The sky above Roxbury was layered in burnt orange and lavender, the kind of view city kids learn to appreciate in slivers between buildings. Malik leaned against the railing, clutching a notebook with pages half written and half avoided. His grandmother appeared behind him, placing a glass of warm lemon tea beside his elbow. "Still thinking about it?" she asked gently. He didn't answer at first. "I didn't hit anyone," he said finally. "Didn't start it. Didn't escalate it." "I know that," Alma replied. "But people don't always care about what's true. They care about what makes them comfortable." He looked out at the street below, where 2 boys were racing their bikes across the sidewalk, laughter echoing like wind chimes. "What if this ruins everything I've worked for?" he said, quieter this time. Alma reached into her pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper. A letter. "Then maybe you need to remind them who you are before they decide for you." The letter was plain, written in Malik's own handwriting from the night before. He had poured every part of himself into it, not to plead, not to defend, but to declare, to reclaim. He'd written it to the school board, to Principal Redford, to the faculty and students of Crestfield Academy. He didn't name Connor, didn't accuse anyone. He didn't describe the punches dodged or the footage that saved him. Instead, he spoke of restraint, of history, of a boy who didn't want to be remembered for surviving violence, but for resisting it. "I'm not what you fear," the letter read. "I'm what you never tried to understand." He ended with a line that lingered. "I want to be remembered, not for who I fought, but for who I refused to become." Alma had read it twice, and then once more for good measure. "You send that," she said, "and they won't just see you. They'll hear you." The next morning, the letter appeared, anonymously, on the school's online bulletin board. No one claimed it, but everyone read it. By lunchtime, it had spread beyond Crestfield, forwarded to alumni, posted on local education forums, and even shared by a Boston City Councilwoman who captioned it, "This is what leadership looks like." Students who had stayed silent before now stepped forward. A junior named Lila admitted she'd once been pulled aside by campus security for wandering suspiciously, even though she'd just been waiting for her ride. A sophomore named Evan confessed he never spoke up when he saw classmates being profiled, afraid it would make him a target too. Stories began to pour out. Subtle humiliations, quiet exclusions, the kind of bias that hides behind policy and politeness. And at the center of it all stood Malik. Not as a fighter, but as a mirror. The shift didn't come with fanfare. It came with questions, hallway conversations that hadn't happened before, teachers pausing before speaking, students second-guessing long-held assumptions. Principal Redford requested a private meeting. Malik agreed. They sat in the conference room overlooking the soccer field. It was quiet, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. "I read your letter," Redford began, no preamble. "Twice." Malik said nothing. "I'll be honest," Redford continued. "I was afraid. Afraid that addressing what happened would break this school apart. But I think ignoring it would have been worse." Malik looked him in the eye. "This school didn't break when I flipped Connor. It cracked long before that." Redford nodded slowly. "You're right, and I'm sorry." Then, something unexpected happened. Redford didn't just apologize. He asked for help. "Crestfield needs change," he said. "But I don't want it to come from a place of shame or fear. I want it to come from understanding, from leadership. I want you to be part of that, if you're willing." Malik didn't respond right away. He wasn't sure he was ready to carry more. But then he thought of the other students, the ones too quiet to be noticed, too cautious to speak. Maybe they needed to see someone like them in a place of influence. Maybe he could help rebuild what had never truly included him. He agreed. In the weeks that followed, Malik helped co-found a new student-led initiative called The Quiet Resistance. It wasn't just about race. It was about listening, about addressing the silent corners where prejudice festered. The group organized listening circles, held anonymous surveys, and worked with faculty to revise discipline policies that disproportionately impacted students of color. For the first time since entering Crestfield, Malik felt like he wasn't just surviving it. He was shaping it. On a chilly Friday morning, as he walked to class, he found something new in his locker. A note, handwritten in blocky script. "You changed how I see things. I'm still angry, but maybe not at you anymore." Malik read it twice. He didn't tell anyone. He folded it neatly, placed it inside the back pocket of his notebook, and closed his locker with a quiet click. He still had work to do. But for the first time, the path ahead didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. The gym was packed, the air electric with the kind of quiet reverence usually reserved for cathedrals. Families filled the bleachers. Teachers stood with their arms folded in the back, and students wore the kind of half-smile, half-sigh expression that comes with knowing something big was ending. It was graduation day at Crestfield Academy, and for the first time in the school's long, iron-gated history, the valedictorian wasn't a legacy kid. He wasn't the son of a donor or a senator. He was Malik Johnson. When Malik stepped up to the podium, the room seemed to hold its breath. He didn't wear medals around his neck or pins on his robe. He didn't need to. The weight of what he'd carried the past year was invisible but undeniable, and in that moment, every eye in the room was fixed on the boy in the gray-trimmed gown, who had once walked through these same halls like a ghost. He looked down at his speech, then folded the paper and tucked it into his sleeve. He wouldn't need it. "I used to think being quiet was my greatest strength," he began, voice steady, clear. "That if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed out of trouble, the world would meet me with fairness. That silence meant survival." A pause. Heads tilted. Faces softened. But silence doesn't change systems. Silence doesn't correct assumptions. And silence certainly doesn't protect you from injustice. I learned that here, not in a textbook, not during office hours, but in the hallways, the gym, the spaces in between. He let that settle. My story isn't unique. There are thousands like me, students who walk into institutions not built for them and still choose to build something better inside of them. Students who carry the weight of two worlds, where we come from and where we're trying to go. And we carry that weight quietly, because we were taught that making noise makes you a target. He paused again, not because he was searching for words, but because he could feel the weight of what he was saying, But I don't regret the noise I made. I don't regret the silence I broke. Because it taught me something I'll carry with me longer than any diploma or honor. He looked out into the crowd, locking eyes with a group of underclassmen seated near the front. Some of them were kids of color. Some were just kids who had never felt like they fit in. All of them were watching him like he was saying something they hadn't known they needed to hear. The truth is, I never wanted to fight anyone here. Not in the hallway, not in the gym. I wanted to learn, to be left in peace. But peace isn't something you find. It's something you build. And sometimes, to build peace, you have to disrupt comfort. The applause started slowly, cautiously. Then it grew, rising like a tide that had been held back too long. But Malik didn't smile, not yet. He wasn't finished. I want to thank my grandmother, Alma, who reminded me that integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody claps. And I want to thank those of you who, after everything, chose to listen. Not just hear me, but truly listen. He stepped back from the podium, nodded once, and returned to his seat. The room erupted. That summer, Malik turned down a full scholarship to Princeton. The decision surprised almost everyone, administrators, teachers, even his closest friends. But when asked why, he gave a simple answer. I don't want to leave and hope change happens. I want to stay and make it. Instead, he enrolled in a local community college with a strong criminal justice program and launched a nonprofit called the Quiet Resistance Initiative. Its mission was simple but radical: to teach conflict resolution, leadership, and self-defense to youth in marginalized communities across Boston. His first class met every Wednesday evening in the same community center, where he'd once learned Aikido from his grandfather. The program grew fast. By fall, he had a waitlist of students and a team of volunteers, including some Crestfield alumni who had once sat silently while he was pushed around. Now, they helped teach younger kids how to speak up, stand tall, and protect their dignity without resorting to violence. Sometimes, Malik still walked past Crestfield Academy on his way to the train. He'd pause at the gate, watching the students file out, the same uniforms, the same laughter. But something felt different. There were flyers on the bulletin board now, student-led diversity panels, restorative justice groups, equity councils. It was slow work, but it was real. One evening, as he finished teaching a class, a small boy lingered behind, clutching his backpack with both hands. "Mr. Malik," the boy said, barely above a whisper, "were you really on the news?" Malik knelt down, smiled gently. "Yeah," he said, "but not for the reasons people think." The boy looked confused. "You didn't win a trophy or anything?" "No," Malik said. "Just peace of mind, and sometimes that's harder to earn." Later that night, as he filed away attendance sheets and folded up spare mats, he found a letter tucked into his office door. It was unsigned, written in uneven handwriting. "You didn't fight me, but you beat me. I didn't understand that until now. I'm trying to." Malik read it twice. He didn't need a signature to know it came from Connor Blake. He folded the letter, placed it inside the same notebook where his journey had begun, and closed it slowly. Because some stories don't need loud endings. They need echoes. And Malik Johnson, once invisible, once underestimated, had become the kind of echo no school, no bully, no broken system could ever ignore again. Malik Johnson didn't set out to become a symbol. He didn't want to be a headline, a viral video, or the face of a movement. He only wanted to learn, to grow, to exist, without needing to prove his right to be there. But when the world cornered him, underestimated him, and tried to define him by fear or stereotype, Malik chose something different. He chose integrity. He didn't retaliate with violence. He responded with discipline, with control, and ultimately, with grace. From the moment he was shoved in Crestfield Academy's hallway, Malik stood at the center of a storm that wasn't just about one boy and one bully. It was about how power is abused, how silence is weaponized, and how systems protect those who already have privilege. Malik didn't crumble under that pressure. Instead, he endured, not because he wanted to be applauded, but because he refused to let someone else write his story. He turned a moment of humiliation into a moment of clarity. He took an ambush and transformed it into a call for accountability. He used his voice not to shout, but to speak truth with quiet conviction. And in doing so, he didn't just change his reputation. He changed the culture of a school built on appearances. His resilience sparked reflection, conversation, and eventually, reform. But perhaps most powerfully, Malik showed us that restraint is not weakness. That walking away from a fight you could win doesn't make you lesser, it makes you wiser. That real strength isn't in domination, but in self-awareness and purpose. And when he finally did speak, through his letter, through his leadership, through his presence, he taught others not just to see him, but to see themselves more clearly. So what can we learn from Malik's story? We live in a world that often confuses volume with power, aggression with strength, and silence with weakness. But Malik reminds us that the most meaningful changes don't always come from shouting the loudest. They come from standing the firmest. In our workplaces, our schools, our communities, we will all face moments where we're underestimated, provoked, or misunderstood. In those moments, we can either react in ways that confirm the worst expectations, or we can respond in ways that surprise, disarm, and inspire. Malik's journey is a call to pause, to listen, and to choose the harder path, the one of character over ego, principle over pride. His story isn't just about surviving injustice, it's about transforming it. And each of us, in our own lives, has the power to do the same. If this story moved you, if it made you think deeper, feel stronger, or believe just a little more in what's possible, hit that subscribe button and support the channel. Your encouragement helps us bring more powerful, real, and transformative stories to light. Because sometimes, one story is all it takes to change how we see the world, and ourselves.